build their own Joe Rogan. I see this clip from the Majority Report. Kyle Kulinski and Emma Vigeland talking about Joe Rogan, why Kyle Kulinski is going to war with Joe Rogan and everything he has, all of the issues he has with the man. And in it, Emma Vigeland says that she went on my show with the intention of never getting invited back. Emma, you are always invited to come on this show. It's a laugh riot, and we enjoy having you. Because when these liberals come on these shows, their ideas fall apart, and we're totally here for it. In this viral clip, Kyle Kulinski basically says that Joe Rogan used to nod along with the leftist things he was saying, and then he'd have Ben Shapiro on and nod along with him as well, because Joe Rogan's a moderate. But he's like, it makes me look like a fool because he was just lying the whole time. They claim that Joe Rogan's simply laundering propaganda. I got news for you guys. Perhaps you are wrong. If everywhere you go, you smell dog poop, perhaps you should look at your boot.
Tim Pool is so good, man. I got to give a second because I don't give this bruh enough credit. Not recently because I've had some disagreements with him. Tim Pool is so good at what he does, man. He laid that out perfectly. That's exactly what happens in this clip. Tim Pool is going to go in on Kyle Kulinski and Emma Vigeland. Emma Vigeland was on Tim Cast, the Culture War show. Wait, yeah, it was a Culture War show. I think it was earlier this year. And Tim was nice to her. She said, this is her words. Tim was nice to her, invited her to play poker, whatever they were doing, and have drinks and talk and forget about the politics and just bond. And Emma goes on her show and says, I went on with Tim Pool with the intention of never getting invited back. Tim Pool did the perfect answer to that. He said, you're always invited back. Tim has always had the highest integrity that I know of a guy of that stature. He outside of Joe Rogan, I don't know if there's any podcast that's more prominent than Tim Pool. And he had some tension with a certain person that when they were on the show, they didn't feel like they had enough time to speak. Tim got so much better at that. That's not even a concern anymore. But there used to be a concern. He's so good. He talks so much. He invited her she kind of talked really bad about him after the show. And Tim brought her right back on. They had a great show. It just high integrity. Let's get into this clip. Tim Pool on his Tim Cast segment on Emma Vigeland, the Majority Report, Kyle Kulinski. Let's go.
But let me lay into these liberal pundits who, Kyle, we've invited you on the show numerous times. You won't do it. Now, I often am very respectful when I talk to these people, and I say, I don't mind. I'm not going to cry when Hassan Piker refuses to come on the show, and he does. Or when Kyle Kulinski says, sure, maybe, but then doesn't, or the same thing with David Pakman. We've been trying to get these people in here forever. I don't complain because they host their own shows. People ask me to do their shows all the time, and I just can't do it.
Yep.
I do host a show with guests, and we do debates on the culture war, so we've created a space here where we can do it. But that doesn't mean Kyle Kulinski owes me anything. And if he's going to be hosting his own show and can't travel, I get it. I respect it. Now, that being said, there are a lot of conservative personalities, even big names, who will forego going on their shows to periodically come on Timcast IRL. So I don't think it's all that great of an excuse, but I will be nice. Let's play this clip, and then we'll debunk and criticize the left's lies and their criticisms of Joe Rogan.
Then you're fake independent media. You're not real independent media. And I'm now going to war because what we saw is a lot of these people like Joe Rogan, I was there. I was on his show 4 or 5 times. He would sit there and nod in agreement when I would make anti-Trump arguments and arguments in favor of a left-wing worldview. Then 3 weeks later, Ben Shapiro would come on and say the exact opposite of me on every issue, and he would nod along in agreement.
And see, let me just start by debunking this. Certainly, if you make an argument to Joe and you say, actually, I think, we should have universal basic income for these reasons. He can go, oh, yeah, that's interesting. That makes a lot of sense. Then Ben Shapiro can come on and say, well, I certainly don't agree with having a universal basic income because, first of all, you can't spend other people's money. And then Joe will be like, that's a good point, too. Like, who's going to do the labor? Joe can entertain the ideas and explain why good points are being made. He's a moderate. I'll tell you this. Famously, Dave Rubin went on Joe Rogan's show and said something about building regulation. And Joe was like, what are you talking about? Mm-hmm. When Joe thinks that something doesn't make sense or there's not a good argument, he does challenge it. So let's not pretend it's not the case.
Yeah, and Kyle is too generic here. Tim Pool's absolutely right. But it's not even that Joe Rogan to me is a moderate. He's logical. If you explain the pros, everything has pros and cons. So if I don't know, I forget what they were talking about. Are they talking about UBI, universal basic income? I'm actually for universal basic income with qualifications. But if you say, here are the pros to the version of universal basic income that I support. The pro is that you cut a lot of the red tape of all the other social safety nets, including Social Security, because we canceling everything. There's no check going out to anybody. No, forget about companies for right now. No check goes out to any citizen other than the UBI. No disability, none of that. Take all that money, take some money from the Department of Defense, everywhere else, and everybody 18 or older gets it. Here's the pros for it. And somebody could say, yeah, I like those pros, but maybe the cons are too much for them. Then somebody else comes in and says, here's the pros to not doing it, or here are the cons to the UBI. And then somebody could say, yeah, you have a good point there too. Just logically thinking through it, you can do that. I don't understand what Kyle wants Joe to do. And Kyle's not being specific. Let's get back to the clip with Tim Pool on Tim Cass getting in on Kyle Kulinski. Pause.
Right. And so at some point, you got to call a spade a spade. You're not independent media, and you're clearly just a vibes-based voter, right? You cocooned yourself in this right-wing echo chamber where you got right-leaning UFC people and right-leaning comedians, and Dana White, his boss, is super right-wing and loves MAGA. He put himself in this echo chamber. COVID helped to break his brain.
Cope harder, Kyle. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself why RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, Joe Rogan, Tim Pool, Dave Rubin, I mean, come on, the list goes on and on of all of the people who have left the left because the left went nuts. Elon Musk, Colin Wright, need I say more? Now, don't get me started on the classical liberal types who are too
Shout out to Colin Wright. He's dope. He's dope on X. He's the news on X.
Scared to say they left the left, whatever. You can leave the left and still be a coward. That's fine. But these people can't seem to get it through their skulls. Perhaps the skulls are too thick. There's a reason why people are saying the left has gone nuts. And it's not that they're trapped in a right-wing echo chamber. You guys are in a cult is the problem. You can't seem to fathom that all of these people recognizing similar things. Emma Vigeland came on my show, The Culture War, and defended adult graphic materials for children. Come on, nobody agrees with that. Lance from the Surfs came on and said, a woman should be allowed to get an abortion whenever she wants. And I said, even at 9 months, like whenever, it's her choice. And I said, can she do meth? And he goes, no, because that would intentionally kill the baby. What?
Yeah, did you see that episode? I still have my reaction to that on this channel. It's unlisted now. I need to put it in a playlist because it was before I started. It was when I was doing the Tim Pool after show, actually, the unofficial after show for this channel. Tim destroyed Lance from the Surfs on here. He destroyed him on that. And I actually agree with Lance on the women should be able to have an abortion all the way up until whatever, as long as a doctor approved, that's between her and the doctor. But you can't have that position, then also say, well, no, they're not allowed to do meth. Huh? That's a kind of a contradictory position. Let me know in the comments what you think about Tim saying about Kyle. I think the biggest problem with Kyle's comments here is he's not specific enough.
You see, it's moments like that where the left is exposed for having miserable ideas. Now, don't get me wrong. The weird thing is, I'm still largely a liberal guy myself. That's right. I've long said I'm probably like a traditional or social liberal, meaning I actually do think there can be successful government programs and there can be successful welfare programs. And I think there needs to be regulation. I just think we're well overregulated and our programs are broken and we need to weed out corruption. But these people act like their ideas are unique to them, but they're so wrapped up in their cult, they can't listen to anybody else. So I go on Piers Morgan, and this woman says something deranged. This lady goes, Tim Pool's a COVID denier who then got COVID and sought ivermectin, which is absolutely 100% false. But guess what? You knew that because you watched the show. And no, I never denied COVID. I did get COVID. I rejected ivermectin. I told Joe Rogan I didn't think it did anything. And I have to be honest, I still don't think it does. I'm not a doctor, okay? I talked to a doctor. Joe responded, no, it's a protease inhibitor. And that stops the virus. And I'm like, I think it's largely that the people who are taking it were being cured of their parasites and worms in these other countries. So it did look like it was having a profound effect on COVID. That seems to make more sense to me. Joe argued with me about it. But this guy's lying. Kyle, you are in a cult.
And then look at that. He goes full MAGA. And you know what? That makes me look like a jackass because I was the one going in there, taking him at face value, acting kind, holding his hand and walking him through it like he was a toddler on these topics. And then, wow, in retrospect, would you look at that?
Goodbye,
he completely flipped. I mean, we were defending him. Unfortunately,
That was disrespectful. Walking Joe Rogan through like he's a toddler. Joe Rogan never says he's like some political genius. He famously said, I look to Comic Dave Smith for my political takes. I'm not a big politics guy. Wow. Kyle Kulinski, that's the clip. We'll stop it there. Let me know what you think on that. I just think it's disappointing on the left, man. I don't know why you guys act like this. Or let me say this. I don't want to say to you guys. Anybody who agrees with Kyle here, why is he acting like this? That's what I really don't understand.
The next clip is ready below. Welcome to After Show Carnage.